welcome to another FGS video. This time we are showcasing all the terrain in my studio while at the same time going through this 8th edition rulebook terrain section step by step. The joy of playing on a battlefield full of terrain with 2 fully painted armies is something most wargamers aspires to, and often such games are the ones that stands out and leaves the fondest memories. Having enough terrain to create the basic scene for your battles could be compared to a theater having the proper costumes and stage sets to do their plays. The wider the collection, the wider the number of plays the theater will be able to do. With that in mind, my quest is to be able to do every play I want in my studio theater, expanding my terrain collection as the channel grows and being able to present to you all the different Warhammer battlefields and environments that the studio armies can fight over. To me, this is just as important as getting all the armies painted and ready for battle. The last 10 years or so I've been making terrain on and off from this rulebook, but now at last it seems to be finished. So today I'm proud to present to you the FGS 8th edition terrain showcase. So, taking a look at the terrain in the studio, we are starting off with some of our impassable terrain pieces. These couple of mountains adds a lot of features to the battlefield, blocking line of sight, hindering movement and restricting areas on the table. Mountains like these can easily be made with a base of MDF, stacking styrofoam or XPS foam on top and cut into shape with a foam cutter. Then apply some gravel and sand for texture, throw on some cheap acrylic paint followed by a black wash and finish it by highlighting with some light grey color. These terrain pieces gives you a lot for the buck as they are massive, cheap to make and adds a lot of twists and strategy to your battlefield. Adding extra details on some of them, like a dwarven mine, caves, crystals or whatever you fancy for your table, only makes the terrain more interesting to behold and helps making each piece stand out. Smaller pieces of terrain like these rock formations or crystals formations can be used as dangerous terrain or impassable terrain depending on what you want. They are another great option for adding these roofs to your battlefield without taking up as much space as the mountains. Depending on your battle mat, you can of course theme all of these terrain pieces to fit in. They could be snowy mountains, huge sand dunes, desert rocks, or whatever you think would look good on your battlefield. Some of the most basic terrain pieces in the game, and probably the most used ones, are hills. These pieces of terrain provides you with an elevated position to shoot from with either your war machines or ballistic troops. This in effect gives you a better line of sight on your enemy. For combat, your troops will always get a +1 to its combat results whenever you charge downhill at your enemy. Gluing gravel or small pebbles on the side of a hill gives you the option to represent a ski slope. Ski slopes have the following rules. Models charging, marching, fleeing, pursuing or overrunning through a ski slope must take a dangerous terrain test. As with the previous mountain terrain, hills are made almost the same way. A base of MDF followed by styrofoam or XPS foam cut into your desired shape of a hill. On top a glued layer of sand and pebbles that you paint with brown acrylic paint, then a black wash and a greyish highlight. To finish it off, you glue on your desired grass flock. Here you can see the evolution of the hills. The first game workshop hills from the early 90s that we all used. and the later 2004 to 2007 plastic model hills. These other hills I made, and I much prefer them to the Game Workshop's ones, as they are shaped more to my liking and ease on how you can place the minis on them. In this hill terrain section of the 8th edition rulebook, we also have two unique mysterious hills terrain pieces: the Anvil of Vaul and the Temple of Skulls. Only one of these terrain pieces were made as a model from Games Workshop, but I never got around to buying it. The Temple of Skulls were released in 2008 and looks like this. Quite a cool model. However, I decided to make the Temple of Skulls myself, and it ended up looking like this. I'm actually quite pleased with the look, and I will be using this as a proxy for the original model. The mysterious terrain rules for these two models reads as follows. The Temple of Skulls. There are many unholy sites dedicated to the worship of the Chaos Gods, and this is but one of them. Ruin and war may have laid it to waste, have scattered its trophies and toppled its grim statues, but the gazes of the dark gods still rests upon its battered stones, hungrily seeking a new champion to bend to their perverse amusements. At the beginning of each player turn, any character or champion on the Temple of Skulls can choose to embrace the fable of the Chaos Gods. If he does, roll a d6. On a roll of 2 to 6, one randomly chosen characteristics increases by 3 points. But on a 1, the Chaos Gods takes his soul, or his pure-hearted comrades turn on him. Remove the model as a casualty with no saves of any kind allowed. The Anvil of Vaul. The legends of Ulthuan tell that when the demons first broke into the world, the smith god Vaul descended from the heavens. It is said that he traveled to every corner of the globe, raising stone anvils from the living rock, upon which he crafted blades of great potency, which the elves used to defend their realms. Though the weapons and their wielders have long since gone, many of the anvils remain. Mere proximity to an Anvil of Vaul bestows a warrior's weapons with incredible enchantments. Any unit within 6 of an Anvil of Vaul has both magical attacks and the flaming attacks special rule. When creating the battlefield for my normal Warhammer games, I usually only place one mysterious terrain piece on the table, so as to have something cool to fight over, besides the scenario special rules. So keep in mind, too many mysterious terrain pieces usually imbalances the game or ends up creating too much chaos on the battlefield. Going on to the woodland section of our terrain showcase. All the woods here have a standard footprint of the Games Workshop 8th edition forests, released in 2007. This is important, as for instance Wood Elves are able to take additional forests in the game, thereby changing the terrain on the battlefield. Some of these are just cut out of MDF and bought some cheap trees on the internet and placed them on top after painting the base. Quite simple, but yet effective. Having watched the Total War Warhammer trailer for the Wood Elf faction, I also wanted to have some Wood Elf runestones on some of my woods, so I simply did a few in green stuff and painted them to the look I wanted. You are then able to just place them on each wood that you would like to be a Wood Elf wood. However, that wasn't quite enough for me. I had to create something much bigger, a centerpiece for the studio's Wood Elf army. And this is what I ended up with. This model was made using a wooden stick and wires as the internal skeleton, and outside a load of model clay that I hand modeled, cut to fit the tree trunk and branches. The tree count was made by hardened horsehair and flock, and I think it turned out pretty well. This piece can now be used as the centerpiece of a Wood Elf Forest. Going back to the rulebook Forest Terrain rules, the following applies to a Warhammer Forest in 8th edition. If a cavalry, monstrous cavalry or chariot model marches, charges, overruns, flees or pursues through a forest, it must take a dangerous terrain test. Models with the flyer special rule that begin or end a flying move in a forest must take a dangerous terrain test. A unit in a forest counts as being in soft cover, provided that the majority of its models are within the forest. Similarly, if a model in a shooting unit has to trace its line of fire through a forest, then the target benefits from soft cover. This applies even if during the game you rearrange a forest's trees around a unit or even remove them. Just imagine the trees are still in their original position. This penalty does not apply if the shooting model is drawing a line of sight out of a forest it is in. It is difficult to form tight ranks when fighting in a forest. A unit with the majority of its model fighting in a forest can therefore never be steadfast, well, unless it's stubborn. On the other hand, units of skirmishers and lone infantry characters are always stubborn if the majority of their models is in a forest. Light troops excel in the uneven terrain of woodland. In this forest terrain section of the 8th edition rulebook, we also have 5 unique, mysterious forest terrain pieces. These were never made as models, as it was presumed that players would just say that the forest on the table was this or that piece of terrain. The rules for these were as follows. Abyssal Wood. A cloud of malice lies over this wood, provoking irrational fears and dark imaging in the minds of those that enter. A unit with the majority of its models within an Abyssal Wood causes fear. Blood Forests. Though these trees slumber fitfully through the cycles of the world nearby, use of magic infuses them with bloodlust. Whenever a spell is successfully cast by or at a model in a blood forest, all units wholly or partially within it suffer d6 strength 4 hits as the tree goes into a feeding frenzy. When any hits have been resolved, the blood forest moves 2d6 in a random direction, moving around any intervening terrain features by the shortest route. This does not move the models that were in the blood forest, it simply walks off and leaves them behind. Fungus Forest. These trees are infested by a chromatic array of mushrooms. It's best not to breathe in too deeply. Any unit at least partially within the Fungus Forest is subject to the rules for stupidity. Any goblin unit at least partially within the Fungus Forest is also stubborn. Venom Thicket. Poisonous creatures abound within. Provided you do not succumb to it first, their venom can be used against the foe. Any model in a Venom Thicket has the poisoned attack special rules. It only applies to melee to close combat attacks. However, any model moving through a Venom Thicket must take a dangerous terrain test to represent their attempt to fend off the venomous critters within. Wildwood. To walk beneath the twisted boughs of a wildwood is folly indeed, for the trees are wrathful. Roll for any unit at least partially within the wildwood at the end of the movement phase. On a 4+, the unit suffers d6 strength 4 hits. In the beginning, I contemplated making all the named terrain pieces. However, doing 5x5 or 5x6 different forests would be way too much. So I decided to create small cards with cool pictures to place on the forests instead. And this is how they ended up looking, and I think this solution was quite clever and a lot more practical. Here we've got an Abyssal Wood card, like that, and let's say this is a blood forest. And we've got, of course, the fungus Fungus Forest. And then onto the Venom Thicket. And let's say this last one is the Wildwood. Like that. And on the back side of each card, of course, I've got the whole description of the special mysterious terrain. I will try to upload the cards to our website whenever there is time for it. Next in line of our terrain walkthrough is our water features: rivers, ponds, lakes and marshland. Making features like these can be done using the previous recipe with MDF for bases, styrofoam or express foam, followed by sand and painting and flocking. However, many of these terrain pieces can also be found and bought online, either as STL files or even as pre-painted in a box. As far as I recall, Games Workshop never produced any models in this category, so here we had to be creative to fill in the terrain pieces ourselves. For my own sanity, I chose to create some templates online, printing and laminating them for ease. This helps a lot on storage space, and you can quickly create the features you like on the gaming table. For rivers, ponds and lakes, the following description can be read in the rulebook. The reassuring and impeding flow of a river can help an army protect its flank or otherwise slow the enemy advance. Launching an assault across a river is no easy task, and often the forts, bridges and other crossing points become crucial objectives for the opposing armies. All rivers use these rules. Rivers and movement. The crushing weight of the water makes it impossible to march through a river. Movement is otherwise unaffected. Rivers and combat. Rivers make for very treacherous footing, and as such are about the last place a ranked up unit wants to conduct its battles. A unit at least partially in a river can never be steadfast unless they are stubborn. Additionally, units even partially in a river cannot claim rank bonus. Bridges and other crossings. Most rivers have at least one place at which they can be crossed, such as a bridge or a ford. Such crossing points should normally be treated as open terrain, but only if the unit attempting to use the crossing point is in a narrow enough formation to fit across. Otherwise, treat the entire unit as being in the river. Whether or not a unit is narrow enough will normally be fairly clear. Here we have 3 different versions of bridges for use with the river terrain. One is pre-painted and bought online. The second is an elf bridge in MDF, also bought online but painted by me. And the last is the only Games Workshop version of a bridge that I know of. The Gothic bridge from the campaign pack Circle of Blood. A paper model that I shined up by adding flock and a base. Paper models like this will also appear later in this terrain video, where we are going through the different released ones from Games Workshop. In this river terrain section of the 8th edition rulebook, we also have 5 unique mysterious river terrain pieces. Again, these were never made as models, as it was presumed that players would just say that the river on the table was that or that piece of terrain. The rules for these were as follows. Boiling blood. This river's waters are boiling with incredible fury. It's best to cross quickly, lest you never leave the river at all. Any models at least partially in the boiling flood at the end of any turn suffers a strength 4 hit with no armor saves allowed. Models that are immune to flaming attacks do not suffer from this effect. Necrotic Ooze. Only the stench of this thick and lifeless sludge can compete with its toxic virulence. Those crossing this river has best hold their breath. Necrotic Ooze counts as dangerous terrain for all models. Additionally, a unit that moves through Necrotic Ooze gains the poison attack special rules until the end of the following player turn. So vile are the waters that cling to their blades. Raging Torrent. The icy rivers of the high mountains run dear, pure and very swift indeed. A raging torrent is dangerous terrain. However, such are the invigorating effects of the icy waters that any models that are in the river or left the river earlier in that turn have +3 to their initiative. River of Blood. When the rivers of the world turn to blood, it is a sign that Khorne has regained ascendancy at the head of the unholy pantheon of the realm of chaos. The time of the Blood God has come. A unit that moves or charges through a river of blood is counted as causing fear until the end of the following player turn. So ghastly is their blood-slicked appearance. River of Light. This is no mere river, but a swirling and seething mass of light magic. When a unit enters a river of light, it is immediately the target of a randomly chosen light magic spell. The spell is automatically cast and cannot be dispelled. If the spell has a choice of different casting values, it is assumed to be cast at the lower value. So as you can hear, there is quite a few different kinds of mystical rivers, and as such I decided to create some cards, just like I did with the forests, to place on the rivers instead. Doing this really makes an impossible job possible, and I feel like this is the best way of implementing all of these mystical terrains. Again, I will try to upload these cards to our website for you to download if you like. So we've got a boiling river here. Got the Necrotic Ooze. Let's get the shine away. The Necrotic Ooze card. And a Raging Torrent. And the River of Blood. And last but not least, the River of Light. And of course on the back side of this card is the description. As with rivers and lakes, I also created the marshlands the same way and printed out and laminating them. These terrain pieces can really make an impact on the gaming table, and the rules given are as follows. A battle in a marsh can easily end in disaster. The footing is unstable, the mud clings to weapons, and as many warriors drown as are hacked apart by the foe. Marshes are therefore best employed as traps to suck your enemy into, rather than bastions from which to fight. All marshland use the rules given. Marshland and movement. Marshland is dangerous terrain for all units other than those with the skirmish special rule. Cavalry, monstrous cavalry and chariots that enter marshland foil their dangerous terrain test on 1 or a 2 rather than just a 1. Again, in this section of the marshland terrain, we find yet again a couple of mystical terrain pieces, which is described in the following way. The Earthblood Mare. Raw magical power of the life wind Guran bubbles through the waters of this marsh. Any unit with the majority of its model within the mare has regeneration 6+. Khemrian Quicksand. The burning desert hides a multitude of traps. Many an unwary warrior has been sucked to his death by the shifting sands of Khemri. The larger the victim, the more certain the fate. A monstrous infantry or monstrous cavalry model that fails its dangerous terrain test for Khemrian Quicksand is removed as a casualty with no saves of any kind allowed. Mist-wreathed swamps. The vapors of this swamp hang in the chill air, hiding those within from the gaze of their enemy. Yet who knows what horrors lurk within the mist, just waiting to pounce. If the majority of a unit's models are wholly within a mist-wreathed swamp, the unit counts as being in hard cover. However, at the end of each movement phase, the unit must pass an initiative test or have d6 models dragged to their doom by the monstrous Khemrian lurking in the mists. The victims are selected in the same manner as the allocation of shooting hits. As with previous terrain, I followed up using the same procedure, making cards to place on the terrain. These will also be uploaded to our website when there is time for it. So here we got the Earthblood mare with the description on the back, and the Khemrian Quicksand. And the last one, the Wreathed Swamp. So now we are on to our obstacles section of the rulebook. Here before us we have the walls and fences Games Workshop released models from 2007 and the much older Citadel hedges that I cannot remember the release date for. All in all, some really nice terrain pieces, although the hedges feel a little too simplistic compared to all the other newer stuff. All the alternative fences are from different small shops on the internet, and much of it looks really good after being painted. Having fences and small obstacles is a nice way to flesh out your gaming table, especially if you are placing a few buildings on the table. Then these fit right in. The rules for fences, hedges and walls are as follows. Fences are gnarled and twisted constructions of wood and lath. Though fences are chiefly designed to keep herd animals in particular location, determined warriors can also use a fence as a rough bulwark in order to keep enemies out. Fences are obstacles that grant soft cover to units behind them and a -1 to hit modifier to charging models in base contact with them. Walls are a common sight, serving as boundaries between fields, estates and even burial sites. Though such a wall is seldom more than chest height, it makes for an incredibly effective impromptu defensive position and can save the warriors sheltering in its lee from otherwise fatal encounters with arrows, crossbow bolts and buckshot. Walls are obstacles that grant hard cover to units behind them and a -1 to hit modifier to charging models in base contact with them. In this obstacle to range section of the 8th edition rulebook, we also have 3 unique mysterious obstacle terrain pieces. Again, these were never made as models, as it was presumed that players would just say that the obstacle on the table was this or that piece of terrain. The rules for these were as follows. Blazing Barricade. The original blazing barricades were magical obstacles called into existence by High Elf mages as they fought far survival during the initial demonic invasions. Though that was now thousands of years ago, the magic that created the blazing barricades still dwells within the ground. Blazing barricades grant soft cover to units behind them. If a unit completes a charge against a defended blazing barricade, it immediately suffers 1 strength 4 hit on each of its models in contact with the obstacle. Ghost Fence. A ghost fence is a barrier with little physical substance, merely a series of poles or posts upon which are hung accursed fetishes and totems to which demonic or undead spirits have been bound with forbidden spells. Only a brave or foolish warrior crosses a ghost fence without good cause or without powerful protective wards. Ghost fences are obstacles that grant soft cover to units behind them. A unit that is defending a ghost fence causes fear in the first round of any close combat. Blessed Bulwark. It is common practice in the Empire for a warrior priest to bless any wall which might have to serve in the battle against the foul creature of chaos. Such enchantment lingers on long after it takes root and even endures through the destruction of the wall itself. Many farming fields and fortress walls in the Empire are bounded by walls constructed of stolen fragments from the best bulwarks and retain a portion of that power. Blessed bulwarks are obstacles that grant hard cover to units behind them and a -1 to hit modifier to charging models in base contact with them. In addition to this, models from the forces of destruction that are in base contact with the obstacle must halve their initiative. As with the previous terrain, I followed up using the same procedure, making cards to place on the terrain. These will also be uploaded to our website when there's time for it. So here we've got Blazing Barricade, a Ghost Fence, and a Blessed Bulwark. One of my favorite categories in this terrain walkthrough is this one, the Mystical Monuments section. Here we have a couple of real Centerpiece terrain models that really stands out and makes for some really fun experiences on the battlefield. I will usually only have one of these pieces on the table, as it should be something worth fighting over for the two opposing armies. The main description of this category in the book reads as follows. Thousands of years of struggle and conquest have left the Warhammer world strewn with mystical relics, monuments and ruins. A battle will often be fought for the control or the defense of such a place and for the awesome power it commands. This is essentially a catch-all category for things that don't fit in other sections. Mystical monuments are best treated as impassable terrain for the purposes of movement. Particularly large or complex mystical monuments might be made up of several terrain elements such as hills or obstacles. So starting off the list of examples the gift of monuments, we have the Altar of Cain. Though his worship is now relegated chiefly to the chill land of Nehekharan, many altars consecrated to the elven god of murder remain throughout the world. Warriors who fight in Cain's shadow do so with bloodlust awakened in their souls. All units within 6 of an Altar of Cain are subject to the rules for Frenzy. As soon as a unit moves out of range, the Frenzy is lost. Arcane Ruins. The stones of fallen temples still resonate magical energy centuries after their final celebrants crumble to dust. Any wizard within 6 of an Arcane Ruin can choose to roll up to 4 dice when channeling rather than 1. However, if 3 or more dice come up as 6s, the wizard must immediately roll on the miscast table. Bane Stone. Not even the most learned of scholars knows the origins of the Bane Stones. Some folk maintain the beastmen raised them in tribute to their blasphemous gods, others that they are jagged of magic made manifest through careless sorcery. Whatever the truth, the battle in a Bane Stone's shadow is to invite swift death, for the stones are hungry and fresh souls are their food. Hits made against units within 6 of a Bane Stone have a +1 bonus to wound. Charnel Pit. In a world of unremitting war, a decent burial, something granted to only the luckiest, for the remainder, eternal repose begins in a mass grave, with enough stones atop to deter wild beasts and enough icons to draw down the blessings of various gods of the dead. Alas, most such charnel pits attract necromancers and other dark sorcerers alike, well, just like vultures to a carrion. By the time these foul folk have finished with the pit's contents, it is sure to be little more than a blood-slicked pit, strewn with body parts and lingering unholy taint that instills fear in but the bravest warriors. All units within 6 of the Charnel Pit suffer a -1 penalty to their leadership. Undead units within 6 of the Charnel Pit have the Regeneration 6+ special rule to represent their easy access to replacement parts. Elven Waystones. There are countless Elven Waystones scattered throughout the world, ancient monuments to the once globe-spanning glory of the children of Ulthuan. Yet, these towering edifices are more than mere markers of sundered past. It is through the Waystones that the Elven siphon excess magical energy from the world. A learned enough wizard can tap into the Waystone's magical current and thus purloin its energies for his own use. Any wizard within 6 of an Elven Waystone adds +1 to his channeling attempts. Idol of Gork, or possibly Morg. Prior to a great battle, orcs raised crude idols of their brutish gods so that their deities might find amusement in the forthcoming destruction. Many of these idols are crafted from mud and dung, and so are quickly worn away by the elements. Some, though, are roughly hewn from boulders of the defaced statues of other races. These can stand against the weather for centuries, allowing Morg, or possibly Korg, an uninterrupted grandstand view of the passing century's carnage. Any warriors fighting under the grim gaze of Morg are infused with the greenskinned gods' lust for battle. Units that start the turn within 6 of the idol can reroll a failed charged distant roll. Magic Circle. Ancient managed ruins raised to empower primitive rites, magic circles can dissipate harmful sorcery and offer protection to those nearby. Units within 6 of the magic circle have the magic resistance 2 special rule. Sinister Statue. Witless watchmen, set to stand sentinel over secret shrines by an ancient and unknown force, these sinister statues take exception to interlopers in a most forceful fashion. At the start of each player turn, roll a dice for every unit within 6 of the sinister statue. On a 4 or more, nothing happens. The statue either doesn't notice the unit or recognizes it as an ally of its forgotten master. On a 1 to 3, beams of light blaze out of its stone eyes. The unit suffers d6 strength 4 hits. Sorcerous Portal. A Sorcerous Portal is prone to appear when certain contours of hill and valley funnel the winds of magic in unexpected ways. Many are caged and harnessed by ambitious sorcerers, but wood and stone cannot easily contain raw magic. At the start of the magic phase, after power and dispel dice have been generated, but before spells are cast, the Sorceress's Portal belches forth energy in the form of a spell. Roll 2d6 on the table below each time to see what the spell is cast. 2 to 4, it's Soul Blight from the Law of Death. 5 to 6, Wizard's Wild Form from the Law of Beasts. 7, Plague of Rust from the Law of Metal. 8 to 9, the Speed of Light from the Law of Light. 10 to 12, Fireball from the Law of Fire. The spell does not need line of sight. Always targets the closest unit regardless of range. If the unit is in combat and so on, it's automatically cast and cannot be dispelled. If the spell has a choice of casting values, it is assumed to be cast at the lower value. Wyrding Well. It is said that the Wyrding Wells are set upon sites where the blood of the world bubbles to the surface. This amber liquid has magical, if unpredictable, properties and is a prized ingredient in many potions and elixirs. Providing it is not in combat, a unit within 3 can drink from the well at the end of its movement phase. Roll a d6 on the following table to discover the outcome of the unit's incautious imbibing. 1. Magical poisoning. Models in the unit cannot make any voluntary action, including shooting, casting spells, channeling, using magic items and so on, until the start of the following turn, whilst copious vomiting ensues. 3 to 4. Ailments banished. The unit immediately recovers 2d6 wounds worth of models, as described for the Law of Life regrowth. 5 to 6. The Gift of Oblivion. The cursing Earthblood erases all fear and sensation from the minds of the drinkers. The unit is subject to the rules for stupidity and is unbreakable for the remainder of the game. Although all of these terrain pieces were very time consuming to craft, they were all a lot of fun to make, and I must admit that I'm very pleased with the end result and that they have all been added to our studio collection. In this next section, we are taking a look at some of the buildings available in our collection. Most of these are bought from all kinds of different online shops and are all perfectly usable for Warhammer 8th edition. Games Workshop have also released quite a few models, with some having been re-released recently. Here is a few pictures of some of the buildings Games Workshop have released over the years. Using buildings on your battlefield also adds a lot to the aesthetics and immersion of the battle, and oftentimes you can weave a narrative involving a small cluster of houses, a village or perhaps even a whole city. There's an endless number of possibilities, and that's why buildings are such great terrain pieces to have in your collection. On the table before us is a few different kinds of buildings. There are these pre-painted, ready to be played out of the box houses, which I find to be totally fine quality. However, the price can be quite expensive for buildings like these. Then we have some foam houses that needed painting, and I believe that the company they came from was a German one called Centerpiece. It was a medium price tag as far as I recall, but they do the job they are supposed to without being extraordinary. Making buildings yourself out of cardboard, foam and MDF is also an option. And if you like these kind of buildings, then there are plenty of YouTube crafting channels that shows you how to make them with easy step-by-step guides. This watchtower is perhaps one of my favorite homemade models, as it is used quite often in the game, as one of the normal scenarios in 8th edition is called the Watchtower. It is made out of crinkle tubes, cardboard, MDF and some styrofoam. I really like the way it turned out, and it really feels like a proper Empire watchtower. Another building I'm rather fond of is my 1998 fortress that I've magnetized to be able to represent 3 different factions: Bretonnia, Empire and Vampire Count. All the windows, the banners and the tower shields are magnetized, and I've made a set of each for Bretonnia and for Vampire Counts in these bags, and you can get to see them at the end of this video in the picture section. The only problem with all these buildings and houses is that it feels like you can never have enough of them, and often I catch myself time after time looking at new cool terrain pieces online. Now that 3D print have become so common, there is some really huge and cool looking models available online, and more just seems to be getting released, which I think is really awesome. Following this building section, we also have a few scattered pieces of terrain. These can be ruins, small statues, graveyards, or whatever you fancy to dress your gaming table with. They could all be just for show without any rules attached to them, or you could make some impassable or dangerous terrain. A ruined house could also still be able to have units occupying it, or you could decide that some are objectives for the game. Even though my studio have got a lot of graveyard terrain pieces, I still have had my eyes on Games Workshop's piece for some time. One of these pieces of terrain that I feel like we still need in the studio is the Games Workshop's terrain piece Sigmarite Mausoleum. This huge multi-part terrain piece comes in one box with plenty of options for creating your gothic graveyard on the battlefield. Released in 2011 as just Garden of More, it was later re-released for Age of Sigmar and Warcry, and has now changed name to Corpse Rack Mausoleum in the latest version. This would make for a great addition to our Vampire Count's terrain inventory, and certainly it's up there on our studio's wish list. Proceeding to this next section of the terrain guide, we have the Arcane Architecture walkthrough, and this is the description we are given about it. Buildings of great power or importance are plentiful in the Warhammer world. Sometimes this prominence comes from the magical nature of the place, at others it comes from the resonance and sanctity awoken in the hearts of its defenders. Regardless, a battle fought over such a building would be a slaughter indeed. A piece of Arcane Architecture can either be treated as a building or as impassable terrain. Models that are inside Arcane Architecture are automatically in range of its effects. As with the previous mystical monuments, I would only ever have one Arcane Architecture terrain piece on the table in each battle, as it usually stands out as a centerpiece terrain. The first of the pieces of terrain mentioned in this section is the Acropolis of Heroes. This ancient place was built long ago. Perhaps it was even raised by the old ones themselves. Amongst its walls, half buried by moss and rubble, lies the statues of fallen kings and heroes whose bold essence lingers on. Units within 6 of the Acropolis of Heroes are stubborn. A unit garrisoning the Acropolis of Heroes gets +1 to hit in close combat. Dwarf Brewhouse. Dwarf Ale is by far the most famous and sought-after beverage in the whole of the Warhammer world. Indeed, entire armies have been known to make a detour to a brewery in order to purchase, or more normally acquire by force of arms, a supply of heated dwarf ale. It is little surprise, therefore, that most dwarfs go to great lengths to fortify their brewhouses, and are careful to place several barrels of cheap but highly intoxicating ale beyond the walls as soon as a marching army enters view. All units within 6 of a dwarf brewhouse have the immune to psychology and stubborn special rules. The rich blend of hops, malts and secret ingredients renders them almost totally insensate to mortal fears. Dwarf units within 6 of the brewhouse are so fanatically defensive of it that they are unbreakable, but must first pass a leadership test with a -3 modifier if they want to move out of range of the building's effects. Grail Chapel. Grail Chapels can be found throughout the world. They are built upon sites where Bretonnian knights have encountered the Lady of the Lake. Though Grail Chapels are often seemingly abandoned and ruined, the power of the Lady permeates every stone, focusing energies of renewal and rebirth. All units belonging to an army from the Forces of Order within 6 of a Grail Chapel have the Regeneration 6+ special rune. Bretonnian units within 6 of a Grail Chapel also have the stubborn special rule. Haunted Mansion. Many an abandoned tower or mansion was once the abode of a necromancer, whose dark sorceries could only be practiced in secret. The necromancer may be long gone, but the poltergeist and revenants remain, as any who enter will doubtless discover. A haunted mansion is normally a building of some kind, but there's no reason why it can't be a ruin or a cave. At the end of the shooting phase, all units within 6 of the haunted mansion suffers these 6 strength 1 hits to represent the spectral strikes of the mansion's guardians. Due to the ghostly nature of these attacks, armor saves cannot be taken against them. A unit inside the haunted mansion causes fear. Nehekharan Sphynx. Long ago, the rulers of Nehekharan bound the trickster spirit of the deserts into great temples. Legend tells that those who entreat a Sphynx receive great power, if they can quench the spirit's thirst for trickery and deception. At the start of each player turn, the player whose turn it is can choose one of his characters within 6 of the Nehekharan Sphynx to challenge the spirit to a wrestling contest. The challenger must take an initiative test. If the test is failed, the Sphynx devours part of the challenger's soul and the model suffers a wound with no armor saves allowed. If the test is passed, the challenger receives one of the following special rules determined randomly for the rest of the game: Devastating Charge, Heroic Killing Blow, or Lawmaster of Death. This last one has no benefit to non-wizards. But that doesn't stop the Sphynx bestowing it inappropriately. Sigmarite Shrine. Sigmar Heldenhammer fought many battles to defend the Nazcan Empire from the forces of destruction. Though Sigmar has long since passed, the folk of the Empire still believe that he watches over his land. This might be thought mere superstition, save for the fact that evil creatures seem rather more vulnerable when they draw near to a Sigmarite Shrine. Any models belonging to an army from the forces of destruction must reroll successful ward saves if they are within 6 of the Sigmarite Shrine. Tower of Blood. The walls of this tower constantly ooze pulsing gore. The unnatural stench has a profound effect upon even the most feeble of fighters, engorging bloodlust and so transforming them into voracious slaughterers. Units within 6 of the Tower of Blood have the Hatred special rule. Units from the forces of destruction within 6 of the Tower of Blood also have the Frenzy special rule. As soon as a unit moves out of range, the Hatred Frenzy is lost. Wizards Tower. Wizards are solitary folk, little able to abide the simplistic minds of the mundane multitudes. Little wonder, therefore, that the mightiest wizards construct great towers to serve as lodging, library, and stronghold. A wizard who are within 3 of the tower at the start of a magic phase is assumed to ransack the tower's library in search of additional spells. He is treated as knowing all the spells from his chosen laws of magic for that phase. If more than one wizard is within 3, randomly choose which one has control of the tower at the start of each magic phase. No room can hold 2 wizards' egos in search of knowledge. All these terrain pieces took ages to make, with some taking up to half a year each. But in the end, I think it was worth it. Alas, just to have a complete 8th edition terrain collection and being able to show and play with every option available is such a blessing, and I'm actually very happy about it. This concludes all the terrain mentioned in the 8th edition rulebook, But before we end the video, I've got a bit more terrain worth mentioning. Paper terrain. All these paper terrain models were spiced up with an MDF base and some flock, and I must admit I really like how paper model terrain look on the battle mat. Of course, real terrain pieces have a bit more coolness to them. However, these old paper models do also have some nostalgia about them that speaks to the hobby heart. Compared to normal terrain, these are very easy to make, and you will be able to craft quite a lot of terrain within a small amount of time. All these models are also Games Workshop models, and they were all released in separate campaign books during the 90s. The first one is The Grudge of Drawing. Here's a picture of the campaign box, and here is what the actual paper models look like. I also made two mine shafts here just to spice things up. I think it turned out quite good, quite well. The next one are Tears of Isha. And here is a picture of the campaign box, and here we have the actual paper models that I made. The next one are Circle of Blood, an undead campaign book, an undead versus Bretonnia. Here is a picture of the campaign box, and here we have the actual paper models that I made. Going on, we have Idol of Gorg. Here is a picture of the campaign box, and here is the actual paper models that I made. And the last campaign box was called Perilous Quest, a Bretonnian campaign. And here's the picture and the actual models that I made. As you can see, I also created a little themed piece of terrain here with a solid stone. And from one of the adventures in the book, there's a wood elf tree where they have killed all the knights and hung all their shields on the tree. And in a tournament in one of the scenarios, there's a theater where you have to save a maiden in a tower, and it's just it's the theater. So she stands on this one and needs saving. And then of course we've got the cool wagon. White Dwarf also had an article called Full Tilt that had some paper models in it. And here is a picture of the front page. And here is the actual paper models for the magazine. Ending the talk about paper models, Games Workshop also released in 1988 a big paper terrain book called Townscape, which had lots of paper buildings in it, actually enough to craft a whole city. I do have this book, so I guess when I've got some more spare time, I'll be making these last paper buildings to complete the paper collection of the studio. Mats. As you've seen in this terrain video, we have only used one mat during the entire video, and that's fine for a showcase. However, if you want to expand your wargaming experience, it is rather important to be able to play on different mats with themed terrain to fit. That way you can get a better feeling with the narrative and the overall immersion of the game. There are plenty of online shops that sells mats, but you must be ready to pay a lot for good quality mats, as they are all quite expensive. In the studio at the moment we have 8 different mats covering desert, snow, underground, city, lava, jungle and 2 different types of grass terrains. That should be more than enough to cover most scenarios and narratives for battles. Regarding future FGS terrain projects, at the moment I'm basing our Tomb King's army for the studio, and when that's done the plan is to make some desert terrain for them to interact with. Some sand dunes, a few desert cliffs, some oases with small ponds of water and palm trees, some desert ruins, a temple and a big pyramid. That's the terrain plan for now, and of course we will update the terrain video every time more terrain is finished and added to our studio. Anyways, that's it. This concludes our terrain video. We hope you have been entertained and gotten some inspiration for today. For still pictures, keep watching. Until next time, take care and be safe.